Okay, this is it. The big mid-season patch. Sorcerer buffs. Come on!
A few moments later.
Does anyone at Blizzard actually play this class? Hello, my fellow sorcerers, and welcome to... It's difficult, it really is. Playing Sorcerer at any point other than when Ball Lightning was literally bugged broken, and even then we still weren't better than Barbarian. It feels like it's just permanent.
Please, sir, I want some more.
What? And that vibe continues with the patch notes for the big mid-season Season 4 patch. Whew. Okay, let's get into this. I will say, admittedly to begin with, there are actually some really good changes here that will help a lot in the future, at least specifically defensively. Paper sockness might well be moving into a thing of the past, but of course that then hard clashes with Infinite Flame Shield, so as long as that is the thing, any defensive buff is kind of irrelevant. And I have to believe and I hope that they won't let Infinite Flame Shield be a thing forever, and that the Season 5 pre-patch will make it impossible while giving us massive, plentiful buffs in return so that we can just feel fun and powerful without having to farm perfect lottery-winning level gear just to compete with, you know, Barbarian. And I was going to say Necromancer as well, but they've lost Holy Bolt Bug, so we'll see how that goes there. In any case, Sorcerer is in a really bad spot right now. If you ignore Infinite Flame Shield, which is not representative of the class, it is like the top 0.1% of people's gear, playing a cheesy, boring build, having to hard fish for the right bosses in the pit while playing around abusing Shatter. It's just not great. So ignoring that, the rest of the class is, especially now that this patch has really helped Druids, definitively the worst in the game offensively, and that really sucks. It also has a mess of fundamental mechanical problems that need addressing, but I realistically know and accept that that's not going to happen in a numbers tweaking patch. We have to hope that Vessel of Hatred, when we actually can get a proper reshuffle with our core mechanics and baseline functionalities, actually does do that, addressing enchantment slots and their imbalance and their lack of creativity forced upon us. Honestly though, a huge factor of Sorcerer's monotonous building style at the moment is that because we lack so much damage, we have to do everything we can to squeeze out every percent just to try and somehow compete, that it forces everything to essentially be the same no matter what skill you're running, because our ways of gaining damage are very universal. We can't be creative or do other things or have a fun little twist because we just need the damage. Obviously this is in endgame, this is in the pit, the rest of the game it is fine, you can do what you want, but that's not really a huge, well, pro, is it? That's just the classes, at least, you know, functional technically. It still has its issues. Honestly, just let us use a wand, focus, and staff at the same time. Have 3 weapons equipped. That would go such a long way. We have really cool, unique staffs, but they're a joke, especially now with tempering, because you give up so much to run them. Like, we hold our staff in one hand anyway while fighting, so we at minimum should be able to still have the focus, but then, of course, everyone would use staff and focus, so just let us have the wand. You're holding a staff in one hand, focus in the other, wand sheathed at your belt. Yeah, that would help cross the gap massively, and we can actually get a bit more creative and also have that power buff we need. We're crying out for a fundamental change that frees the class. We don't just need skill does 10,000% more damage. That's a band-aid fix. Yes, it would feel good for a while, but we need an actual mechanical change that frees up what we can viably do, build, and experience that isn't just this kind of homogeneous blob of sameness no matter which skill you're running. Oh, and if you are wondering, my signature build in the background that I am currently running, I will be releasing probably in a couple days, I think, if you want the build, so do look out out for that. So let's actually dive into this patch. I realize that I've already spent a bit of time lamenting there, but I really can't help it. I love this class. I love its skills. I love it on a conceptual level, the essence of it, magic in games like this, and I will stick with it forever, pushing it, building it, theory crafting it, but by God, it would nice to actually be, you know, not even just on top for once, but just solidly good for once in a way that isn't literally broken or abusing perfect gear in a way that still is very dull to play. Alright, let's jump into the patch then and actually look at what's happening for us, and hold on to your hats. Beginning with the more global general changes, we have healing potions going up, which is just nice. It helps a little bit Soulbrand Temerity combo, but while Infinite Flame Shield is a thing, that's kind of irrelevant, but in the future, yeah, cool to see. Then, relevant to Sorcerer, Andariel's Visage getting a bit of a damage increase is really nice, and the localization of the Nova on the enemy is a good bit of functionality for it, and honestly, Andariel's Visage is a weird one. It gives us that stack of poison for Talrash's, but now that Talrash's is capped, it's easy to get that from the Elemental Surge tempering on one of your weapons. If we could have all 5 stacks from Poison and Shadow, using Andariel's for Poison and then Shadow on the weapon for 5, yeah, that would be really nice. In a world where we don't need Shaco for +4 ranks to Flame Shield, so it lasts that extra 0.4 seconds, because Infinite Flame Shield is all we can do to compete, I could see this actually coming into play on certain builds as a viable damage increase and to free up the tempering option on your weapon for builds that have relevant tempering options. You could get your 4th stack here and then both Wand and Focus actually double cast the skill, so yeah, it is fun to see this, and perhaps in future seasons when we're freed of Flame Shield, this could come up. Starless Skies is just a great buff. It is a really nice ring and 50% multiplicative along with the mana. Yeah, lovely. I'm still not entirely sure it beats out a normal ring with aspect and tempering. You can get a lot of damage out of that, especially as you probably don't need the help with the mana, so it's just a damage comparison, but at least it pushes it in the right direction. The Paragon stat changes, though, are quite interesting. This should mean that we can activate nodes much deeper into the board for both willpower and dexterity, so yeah, a little bit of a gain, nothing crazy, but at least it's nice to know that once you get to sort of board 4, 5 onwards, you just write them all off. We might actually be able to get them now. Then to get to Sorcerer specific then. Beginning with a buff to Ice Armor, you now get 25% of max life instead of 30% of base life. Whoa! Like, this is so silly. Like, it's better, yeah, but Ice Armor, you gain barrier from hitting things, and then you will quickly get to the barrier cap, which is equal to your maximum health, so this fundamental alteration just doesn't really do anything. We need barriers changing. The actual amount that gets generated needs to scale with something properly that Sorcerer has, not just your health. We need to have barriers be able to out-barrier your health. Sorcerer should be running around on 10k max health with a 30, 40, 50k barrier. That's how the tankiness should come. That's Sorcerer's thing. We really need the barriers uncoupled from max health and them to scale in a different way. Obviously, if Ice Armor could just grow and grow and grow and grow infinitely while it was on, then it pretty much would make us immortal, so some sort of cap, but max health just ain't it. It really cripples us, and having to put any kind of points into health or any affixes into health lowers our already pathetic damage, so we just get to flop around a little bit but still be squishy. That's why Immortal Flame Shield is a damage increase, because we get to free ourselves from anything defensive and then squeeze out more damage, but it's just such a lame, painful way to go about it. So, yeah. This is just nice, an extra second of 30% DR, lovely. This will make a lot of builds feel a lot tankier later on, once Infinite Flame Shield is taken care of. Happy with that. Incinerate, making you even tankier while channeling it. Yeah, not going to complain. Nothing earth-shattering, but it is a nice defensive buff. Talking of nice defensive buffs then, let's go into the passives. Potent Warding. Being able to gain a max resist of 6% per skill, including basic now. Yeah, there is actually something in that. We could go to 76%, then if we have the Enchanted Glyph, go up to 81% in 2 elements, maybe fire and frost most likely. That's actually nice, and in a world where we actually have to care about our defensives again, Infinite Flame Shield is impossible, and they have buffed our damage to compensate. This is a really good way to get a little bit of tankiness, and while I don't think it'll be premium, it's at least worth looking at. Glass Cannon is already fabulous, and it just being even better is only a good thing. Again, every build takes 3 out of 3 Glass Cannon, so you're not even really going to notice this, but hey, it'll make it easier to not die in future seasons. Look, okay, I'm going to say the sentence, when Infinite Flame Shield is no longer a thing, a lot here, so just presume that when I'm talking positively about a tanky buff that we're getting, it is in the world where inevitably, because surely they have to, because they can't have everyone farming that level of perfect gear every season, because 99% of sorcerers are never going to do it, so they'll always feel garbage, and even then, playing Immortal Flame Shield feels garbage in the build that does it with Firewall and the gloves. In any case, yeah, assume that that has been fixed, and in that world, yeah, a little bit less damage taken from Glass Cannon, lovely. Align the elements for an extra second of duration, that's not bad. This one here, keeping that 40% DR for 3 seconds, letting it build up between hits, I can actually quite get behind that. Again, nothing crazy, but a nice little increase. Conduction is fun to see. The duration kind of doesn't matter because it's permanent if you are repeatedly proccing it with a shock build. Might matter more if you're only getting it from teleport, because you'll be teleporting less than every 4 seconds for the most part, but 12% movement speed is nice. Except it's also completely useless. The reason being is that essentially every sorcerer build is trying to get as many conjurations out as possible because this is a really good skill to stack and it gives a load of movement speed. So we don't really need this extra help here in conduction. It's kind of alright for I have literally 1 point with nowhere worthwhile to go, which is why the current build I'm tweaking does have it, but it's just sort of irrelevant. It's kind of a nothing. It plays into Esu's Heirloom to get attack speed, of course, more crit chance, but we get all of that move speed, not attack speed, move speed from the Conjuration Mastery here, so it's just sort of okay then. If that ever changes and we're freed from working as many conjurations active as possible into every build, then it might start to be a bit more relevant, but not at the moment. Warmth, however, is a nice buff. Doesn't hugely affect endgame, though I could see some fun with an ultra tanky take on Incinerate, where you do just stand there and ignore everything, maybe with Temerity. 6% is a big increase over 1.8 on your bosses, and 1.5 per enemy is also quite noticeable, but mainly this will affect leveling and making it easier to just never die and power through as you go, but I won't complain. It's just, again, just mild, right? As much as I hate saying this, the best way to sum up the changes generally is mid. Inner Flames going to 12%, an extra 3% multiplicative, healthy on your pyromancy. Yay! Woo! 3% more damage! Cool! Haha! How much are Barbarians hitting for again? Oh, like 100 billion? Okay, cool! Haha! Yeah, fun! What's the point? Like, it's nice, sure, every build that does fire damage will take it and it'll hit a little bit harder, but it's just not doing anything, it's not addressing anything, and neither is overflowing energy. This is a joke. What's this? Who's reading this and going, well, I'm going back to overflowing energy, oh yeah! We have ridiculous cooldown reduction because we have to have it for Infinite Flame Shield, but even without that, we want as much cooldown reduction as possible as Sorcerer in general. And because now we have our Ice Blades with attack speed inherited from us playing overflowing unstable currents to get the attack speed, and of course we're all playing Esu's Ferocity for Ancient Flame for the attack speed, and we can use Flicker Step if we want. Like, there's also Hectic if you've got a basic, like, there's so many ways to reduce cooldown that we're using that this just ain't it. And it's not like anyone's playing it for the damage from crackling energy to hit one additional enemy. This is a cooldown reduction machine key passive that is the worst one we have currently. It used to be worthwhile before we had all these other options, don't get me wrong, but it's just been power crept massively by the rest of the game as the seasons have rolled around. This needs either completely, well actually no, there's no either. This just needs reworking. It needs to be some sort of proper damage amp for shock-based builds. Let Via's Mastery be the tankiness, yeah, a little bit of damage, but let it be the tanky, and let this give some mean damage to shock-based builds. Eventually, Via's Mastery will be fixed, and the damage increase will only affect shock and not fire and frost, which will make it less desirable, but you're still always going to take it in every shock build over overflowing energy, because we'll have infinite unstable currents anyway from other means. So, this worries me, and I really hope in Vessel of Hatred, this is just a completely different key passive, and I believe it can be, because Combustion was essentially completely amped from what it used to be, or at least it gained that block 20% to begin with, which was nice, and this needs kind of at least that level of gain. Then we have Avalanche, probably the best offensive change we've gotten. 60% multiplicative increase on the frost skill that consumes it. Yeah, that's really quite nice. The only issue is nothing really uses it, because you're either using Via's Mastery, because that's just a permanent 15% multiplicative that's getting even more with this patch, or you're using Ancient Flame with Essu's Ferocity. So it's hard to justify Avalanche's existence, honestly. Though, that said, in the future, or while leveling, or when your mana's not sorted, you do go into Avalanche, so this is nice there, and there is some potential. Avalanche with Ice Shards is the only build that I at least have some sort of thing I want to try based on this patch, and I will let you know how it goes, but it's still nothing crazy. Combustion is... whoa! 2 to 4% per unique source of burning. Ho ho! Hold the phone! Okay, look, numerically that's a 100% buff, but in realistic terms it's still nothing. The issue with combustion and burning builds in general is it's designed to go, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have a firewall going, meteors burning, incinerate going, hydra burning, fireball enchantment burning, you've got like 6 different burns, here's 12% multiplicative more burn, still half the value of a generic aspect like Storm Swell that's just sat on your gear. This is your key passive, by the way. It's like, okay, cool, but imagine how impractical that is. Sorcerer doesn't do enough damage to have the luxury to do creative multi-skill builds, really. We have to focus on one thing. Combustion would make sense for Flame Wall if each individual firewall added a stack and counted as a different source of burning, but it doesn't. That needs to change. Firewall could be a boss-melting monster if each individual firewall applied an extra stack of combustion. You could actually see some heights there. So it being 4% is nice, but until the Sorcerer itself is mechanically changed and freed from what it currently has to do to gain damage, it's just not going to happen over the permanent Essu's Ferocity, Via's Mastery, or Shatter if you're pit pushing and abusing. So potentially this will come in handy in the future, but for now, an extra 5% crit chance is fine, I guess. It's like a little, you know, a pittance been flicked our way that's cool. It's better than not, but it's not going to change anything. Same with Shatter. Shatter is fun. Exploding frozen enemies, they do a lot of damage, and that is nice. Chaining it a while. Actually using it in a normal setting is really interesting. Using it to pit push with Infinite Flame Shield is much less so. And then Via's Mastery, 5% more multiplicative damage on your shock builds. Yeah, that's cool if you don't need to use Ancient Flame, for Ice Blades, for cooldown reduction, for Flame Shield, and you see what I mean! We need freeing from Flame Shield with lots of damage buffs to compensate. Then all of this tankiness increase, going to 25% here, which is really nice, all of these gains to actually make us harder to kill would make sense and actually be really welcome. But as it currently stands, what this reads is, if you care about pushing the pit, you're at Infinite Flame Shield. If you're Infinite Flame Shield, you don't care about buffs to your defense, and then we've got nothing buffing our offense here, really, in any realistic terms. So it just feels a little bit desperate. But the bottom line of these passive changes is that from Season 5 onwards, when I have to imagine they will nerf Infinite Flame Shield to be impossible, we will be tankier, easier, so we can put more into damage on the builds and still be as hard to kill generically. That said, though, our actual damage going up is just non-existent, and unless anything else significantly changes in the Season 5 patch, we're still going to be behind the other classes unless we happen to have some sort of broken, ridiculous interaction with whatever the seasonal power mechanic will be. So, we go on to legendary aspects. Concentration, 25% global DR instead of 20. That is lovely. We're constantly pressing a conjuration. Again, mainly because of Infinite Flame Shield and Cooldown Reduction Ice Blades, but still, that is good. It's kind of irrelevant now, but in the future, this will become a premium defensive aspect. An extra bounce on Chain Lightning does nothing. If you're playing Chain Lightning, you're going to be using this anyway, and one extra bounce does not make Chain Lightning good if it's not already good, so thanks. Overwhelming Currents, the chance for an extra shock skill, unless you're doing something very niche or fun or not endgame. This can be quite entertaining to have more going out, more lightning spears, more stacks of conjuration mastery, but like, you're giving up a whole aspect for an extra chance to cast shock skills. Like, this would have to say probably 75% before it's worth more than just globally increasing all your damage you do by at least 30%, which is what an aspect is worth on average. So it's fun to fire out more shock skills, but it's not exactly good yet, at least at these new numbers. Mage Lords is nice, just having the unconditional, if there's a close enemy, you get that tripled up to 28% DR. Yeah, really good, and might actually see some use when we're not relying on Flame Shield. I like that one. Shattered Stars, your Meteor extras doing a 10% more damage isn't going to suddenly make Meteor good. It's just not. Like, we need just a fundamental chunky buff on the raw damage that Meteor does, that Ice Shard does, that Chain Lightning does, that Charged Bolts does, that Pure Firewall does. Then these buffs start to matter and might tip it over, but as it currently stands, they just tickle things, and tickling something 10% harder is just still a tickle. Aspect of Frozen Memories going from 1 to 2. This is interesting. So, you only really want this if you're trying to use it to solve mana problems. But I actually think there's some potential here. Suddenly, if this is going to 2, that means when your key passive in Avalanche activates, you get 3 free casts that do 60% multiplicative more. If you can somehow engineer it so that in those 3 casts you trigger Avalanche again, you essentially achieve permanent 60% multiplicative more damage, which is huge and worth it, and infinite mana, so all the rest of your gear doesn't need to help solve mana. So maybe if that's possible, I don't think it will be, but there is potential there. You might have to give up your neck or a 2-hand aspect slot to make this 3 or 4 respectively, which might then do it, but it's probably just a meme. But hey, it's good while leveling, so I will give it that if you want to level as a Frost build, even though Incinerate leveling is just peak and probably will be for a long time. This, going to 5, is whatever, an extra 5 ranks of Conjurations. No one is playing Conjurations for pure Conjurations for the damage, because again, they're just so weak baseline, and an extra 2 ranks in them isn't going to change that. This is all an absolute insulting level joke. Yeah, I'm going to run the Flamescar wand on my Incinerate build because I would rather have Embers hitting 35% harder than a 2-handed staff with flamethrowers making my Incinerate do 500% more damage. Like, I don't think they understand how hard these Embers would have to hit to make it worth dropping a 2-handed staff on Incinerate, and this is why we need staff and wand and focus 3 weapon slots. Not just this, but lots in general. It actually would let us do some fun things, like, hey, I'm firing Incinerate out my staff, but I'm still getting all these little Embers from the unique wand that I've slotted in there. That would be really fun and cool, and the extra ranks of Incinerate, and it would be worth it, and it would make the unique not completely pointless that it's in the game. Please, let Sorcerers use staff, wand, focus. Like, honestly, 3rd enchantment slot, Staff 1 focus, and then like a 20% buff of damage on baseline to our weak skills. I'll take it. I'm happy. That does a lot for us. Okay, cool. Nerf Infinite Flame Shield so we don't have to feel like we have to grind perfect gear to be competitive. That would make a very fun class. In any case, this ain't it. Neither is this. You are not giving up your amulet slot to have a 10% chance to do a weak Nova of damage when you pick up Crackling Energy. If Esadora's was like 75% chance, so 3 out of 4 crackles did the burst, okay, we can build with that. We can make that an actual build. But 10%? This would have to be, I don't know, like 200% multiplicative, probably even more, actually, to make that worth it. I love this item. Conceptually, it's so much fun. I would love to have a build that's just make and pick up Crackling Energy, and each one is this little bomb of lightning that goes off and it kills things. But currently, it tickles things, and you have to give up one of the most valuable gear slots in the game to do it. Then we have this. A buff to a unique staff, which we will never use because you need weapon tempers and you need a double aspect to actually function. Or you need the focus with the cooldown reduction. So until we can have both a focus and a staff at minimum, no one in the world of tempering is going to use a unique staff unless it is buffed to the point where it is brokenly absurd, and then maybe. Like if this said, oh, you know, we've buffed it from 40 to 60 to 800 to 1000. Okay, cool, I'll bust out my unique staff, and that's never going to happen, so this is never going to happen unless there is a fundamental change. And that sucks, because Gloves of the Illuminator, Staff of Endless Rage, Fireball is so much fun. The swarm of extra powerful fireballs bouncing around the place, yeah, that's great. But this just ain't it. And that's really how I describe all of these changes. Now we're done. It just ain't it. On the positive side of things, eventually they will fix Infinite Flame Shield being possible, ideally with a load of damage buffs to compensate, and in that world, defensively, now that we need to care about defensives again, we're doing really well, we're happy, these are some good changes. Offensively, we are still absolutely pathetic compared to all the other classes, and nothing is changing based on what is changed here. The class still has fundamental issues that aren't going to be addressed by numbers, but at least we could have a band-aid of numbers like we got with Broken Ball Lightning, so we can at least compete while waiting for fundamental changes that we need. But as it currently stands, Sorcerer builds do too little damage while being forced to all build in the exact same ways because we do too little damage, and this patch is not changing that too little damage. So it's disappointing, it is a shame, and I really hope that Season 4 brings us better luck. I will always be here on Sorcerer, always pushing builds because I love it fundamentally, but I really will always be crying out for the changes we need because it's not right that only, well, a couple of the classes get to feel like they should in an ARPG all about that power fantasy. In any case, that's my thoughts for now. Let me know what you all think. Like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.